To our distinguished panelists, research instructor, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant day to everyone. Research has been an integral factor for the past decades in building and developing our society, with its results that piles up in the body of knowledge in the different areas. Thus, having this thought in mind, we are here today to present our study entitled Financial Risk Management Practices and Financial Performance of Credit and Multipurpose Cooperatives in Baguio City. Our study will particularly include only the credit and liquidity risk management practices of credit and multipurpose cooperatives. Credit risk is a critical risk to cooperatives providing loans. Thus, having a sound credit risk management practices is an utmost priority in decision-making process, on financial data, and judgmental assessment of the cooperatives, as well as to achieve their desired financial objectives. Liquidity risk management practices, on the other hand, are also significant in predicting the performance of cooperatives as supported by Frederick in 2014, Osoro and Muturi in 2015, and Kenyua and Warui in 2017. These involve combination of actions to ensure meeting the obligations as they fall due and increase the cooperative's financial performance. To discuss furthermore, we have Joali.
In view of increasing complexity of credit and multipurpose cooperatives' dynamic operating environment, risk management has become very important. Financial institutions are constantly taking efforts to reduce various risks that threaten the financial information of their clients and to protect their treasury from unreliable borrowers. Credit risk greatly affects the performance and solvency of financial institutions. It is to be pointed out that when a borrower misses a monthly payment, or worse, defaults on a loan altogether, the lending party is at a loss. Since cooperatives get their income from their members, it is important for them to thoroughly evaluate each borrower's credit risk and strengthen their credit risk management practices in order to mitigate this threat. Liquidity risk also needs to be managed effectively since it helps ensure the continuity and stability of financial institutions. It has a spiraling effect that often tends to compound other risks such as credit and market risk. Kahn and Ali observed that as financial institutions carry out various functions involving cash and other liquid assets, financial institutions become exposed to liquidity risk. This could affect the reputation of the company, which may increase the cost of capital and thereby hurting the financial performance of the institution. Thus, by reinforcing liquidity risk management practices, institutions with financial services like credit and multipurpose cooperatives are able to ensure an amount of liquidity consistent with the desired level without distorting the profit-making ability and its operations. More importantly, effective management of credit and liquidity risk will greatly help on the long-term success of credit and multipurpose cooperatives offering credit services to its members.
Now let's go to the scope and delimitations of the study. The first one being, the research only aims to find out the extent of compliance on credit and liquidity risk management practices of these cooperatives. The respondents will be, again, only the credit and multipurpose cooperatives in Baguio City, Benguet. And the research is started during the academic year of 2020-2021. The major problem of this study is that to find the relationship between the two variables, which are the risk management practices compliance and the financial performance of the cooperatives. To answer the major problem of this research, we're going to have to answer specific problems. The first and second being to assess the extent of compliance of credit and liquidity risk management practices of the respondents in terms of their identification methods, analysis techniques, monitoring procedures, and mitigation measures. The third specific problem that we're going to have to answer is that to find out the financial performance of the cooperatives in terms of its return on asset and return on equity. And lastly, we're going to have to correlate the extent of compliance of these cooperatives to their financial performance.
The credit and liquidity risk management practices, which are the independent variables of the study, are divided into four areas: the risk identification methods, risk analysis techniques, risk monitoring procedures, and risk mitigation measures. Risk identification method is the starting point for understanding and managing risk. It includes the development and implementation of policies procedures, and regulations to identify credit and liquidity risks in the cooperative. It simplifies the effective examination of fields and events where the cooperatives are at risk. The compliance of these practices will enhance the transparency and accountability of the management of the cooperative. Risk analysis techniques determine the impact of identified risks to the entity's operation. This includes the measurement of creditworthiness of the member borrower and practices when granting loans. The common determinants of creditworthiness of the borrower are their character, capacity, collateral, capital, and condition as is stated in the study of Aradanas, Palacio, and Suazo in 2018. Risk monitoring procedures include the timely reviewing of policies and handling credit problems and liquidating assets, as well as determining the usefulness of risk response procedures, validating the compliance of risk response decisions, and identifying any deviation that would affect the risk posture of the cooperative. Lastly, risk mitigation measures includes the practices to reduce the impact or prevent the occurrence of risk. Several financial institutions implement different kinds of risk mitigation measures such as risk avoidance, risk reduction, risk sharing, and risk transfer. This includes guaranteeing loans, implementation of limits and audit, sharing credit information, and strengthening internal control and board oversight. Meanwhile, the financial performance, which is the dependent variable of the study, will be measured through the return on asset and return on equity of the respondents. These profitability ratios are used to evaluate the capability of the cooperative to generate income associated to their expenditure and other related costs that are incurred during a given period of time, which is vital to the concept of solvency and going concern of the organization. The return on asset shows the percentage of net earnings in relation to the cooperative's total assets, while the return on equity shows the percentage of net income in relation to the members' equity. This study will determine the extent of compliance of the cooperative to the independent variables and will correlate with the dependent variables. The relationship between the two variables may vary depending on the moderating variables, which are the classification and membership size of the cooperative.
To guide us researchers with the conduct of the study, let's proceed to the methodology. This study will use the descriptive correlational method. The descriptive part will cover the variables of the study, and the correlational part is intended for the correlation of the extent of compliance to credit and liquidity risk management practices to the financial performance of the multipurpose and credit cooperatives in Baguio City. There will be 126 respondents coming from both the credit and multipurpose cooperatives, wherein we will choose our respondents out of the 182 credit and multipurpose cooperatives in Baguio City using the Slovins formula. And to determine these 126 respondents, we will use stratified sampling method. Then with the analysis of the elements within the strata, we will use simple random sampling method. As for the data gathering procedure, first we have to acquire a list of the registered cooperative through the website of the Cooperative Development Authority. Then select the cooperatives that we will be using as respondents. Then lastly, we will float the questionnaire. We will float questionnaire by conducting it within the premises of the respective offices of cooperatives that we will choose as respondents or through the digital platforms such as Google Forms, whichever circumstances permits us to do so.
For a data gathering tool, the researchers will use an adapted standard questionnaire for self-assessment of risk in banks from the Institutional Risk Assessment Framework, which was introduced to proactively monitor risk and management policies in cooperative banks in Pakistan. The study will specifically utilize questions under the credit and liquidity risk management, which are aligned with CDA provisions in the Philippines. It is divided into sections for the cooperative profile, credit and liquidity risk management, in which a 6-point Likert scale will be utilized, and further financial performance. Data gathered will be run through SPSS, and descriptive statistics will be used to summarize data of each variables. Pearson's product moment of correlation will be used to determine and interpret the relationship between these variables. Thank you.